Record. All right. So, what we're going to talk about today is something that we talked about before, but maybe not as in depth. And we have a few new faces in the group. So, I wanted to make this presentation a little cleaner, maybe make it a more understandable, maybe a little more relatable. And it is fat loss is not linear. As you all know, it moves in phases. So, what people expect is to hop into a dieting phase and it just goes downward the entire time. There is no spikes, there is no dips. It just goes down the entire time. And what really happens is it'll go down, it'll go up, it'll plateau, it'll go down, up, down, 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 up, down. So typically, this is what happens. 99.9% of the time, you hardly ever have something like this happen on a day-to-day basis. But we're going to get into that and dive into that a little bit. So, if you're still treating fat loss like an all out sprint, you're setting yourself up for burnout and failure because the truth is, fat loss is not linear and it never is going to be linear. It doesn't happen in one straight shot from point A to point B. Your body was built for two things: survival and reproduction, not to have six pack abs or big quads, whatever that you wanted to say. When you start cutting those calories out, it notices the change and it starts to adapt. This is why we use phases. These are strategic windows of time to where we shift your food, training, cardio output, and just expectations of the goal that we have at hand, depending on what all that we need to do to get to that goal. And when you understand how these phases work and when to move in and out of these phases, fat loss becomes a system and not so much a guessing game. That's why that is so important that you guys look at that timeline sheet that I have for each and every one of you to kind of look at the timeline for what current phase that we're in. So again, once you can understand what phase that you're in, and we can hit these mini goals of completing each phase, again, that's when fat loss is a system and it's not just a guessing game. So let's walk through each one. So the priming phase, we have to build that foundation. Number one, this is where most people need to start, but hardly anybody wants to do this. It feels slow and it's boring. It's boring for me, so I know it has to be boring for you guys as well too. And I've been in these phases plenty of times, so I know how boring it can be. There is no instant scale drop. You're not in a deficit. You're actually in a surplus, and this really doesn't feel like any kind of real work. But your digestion is a mess. Your energy sucks. You're barely eating anything. Your hunger is just out of control. It's all over the place. Your appetite is there. One day it's gone the next. Your steps are all over the place as well, and you frankly have no business jumping into a cut. You need to find that structure first, and this is where the priming phase shines. It's all about getting your body ready to lose the fat. Now, this means you're going to be eating at or slightly above maintenance. We're going to be establishing um, protein intake steps, hydration baseline, lifting consistently to build muscle and getting that daily step count going as well too. Reducing stress and improving sleep as well, because if those last two are not controlled, as we've talked about several times before, really nothing else is going to affect your progress in a more negative or a more positive way than having great sleep and reduced stress. And again, this is not very fun, but it's what sets up the deficit to actually work like it's supposed to. If you skip this phase, fat loss will be okay for the first 3 to 4 weeks, and then you're going to hit a wall, and you're going to hit it hard. Your body will pull the e-brake and you will not go anywhere. You'll end up frustrated, bloated, burnout, aggravated, and just a huge stall in progress. And then at that point, you will have to go up into the priming phase. So you essentially just wasted 3 to 4 weeks of time because you wanted to jump the gun and do things out of order, I guess is the best way to put that. Now, priming for most people can take 4 to 12 weeks. That's kind of on average. This is depending on the person. Sometimes this has to be longer if you're coming off of years or dieting or metabolic stress, but typically the reverse phase is anywhere from 4 weeks, up to 12 weeks. And again, it just depends, but that's about the average amount of time. So once you get done with the priming phase, we hop into the fat loss phase. And the big word here is execute. If you do not execute during the fat loss phase, um, this is where your results will become pretty much stagnant. So this is the part that everyone wants to jump to. I hop on, a consult call with a potential client. I want to lose weight. I want to, lose 20, 30 pounds. That's what they want to do right out of the gate, but they're not ready to do that just yet. During this phase, you're going to be in a calorie deficit, and the goal is pretty simple: lose fat while preserving as much muscle as possible. But just because the plan is easy and the outline of what we're going to do is pretty black and white, I mean, I listed out for you. Simple doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Your margin of error shrinks in this phase. Your body is now running on less fuel. You have more output requirements. So this is where every habit matters more. So the biggest one is the food intake has got to be dialed in. So let's just say, for instance, if you're a female and you're eating 1,500 calories a day, right? And we do a very standard 10% pull of your caloric intake. That's 150 calories, right? If you've ever really looked at how much is 150 calories, let's just say if it's coming from almonds or something, right? That's just a handful of almonds, 5 to 10 almonds. That's nothing. If we initiated the cut and we're trying to keep you moving forward and we pulled 150 calories out, but you're over here grabbing candy out of the candy jar at work, just one piece, it's not going to hurt, right? Or if you grab two or three chips out of the bag and they're not accounted for, you're throwing yourself out of that deficit. So that's why your margin of error shrinks in this phase, and the more dialed in and detailed that you can be, um, the better results that you'll get. So back to every habit that matters more. Once again, food intake must be dialed in. Everything must be accounted for. There is no free calories, unaccounted calories. It has to be taken into consideration here. Training has got to be consistent and progressive. It doesn't have to be your best session every session that you go in there, but it doesn't need to be progressive in some manner. Some days just getting in there is better than nothing, but those days tend to be or need to be very few and far between. We need to make sure that we're executing in the gym while we're in there as well too. And as always, sleep, digestion, stress, all this stuff must stay in check. Movement, which is steps, becomes a key driver to your deficit. This is also where your biofeedback starts to shift. Hunger is going to increase. Energy might dip out. Performance in the gym is going to stall a little bit, and all of this is normal to a point, right? If it gets to be too big of a concern, then we have to address and mitigate that as much as we can. But this is why we monitor week by week, looking for signs of, adaptation. Has hunger become unmanageable to the point to where you think about food all day long and you're on the verge of binging every day, right? Are you dragging throughout the day? Energy is so low that you're just having to intake several cans of energy drinks to stay awake during the day. Are you mentally checked out, or are you constantly craving junk food? If these are issues that are, arising, these are signs that we're approaching the end of this phase. Not that the plan isn't working, it's just ran its course, and now it's time to shift gears and go on to the next phase. Because remember, fat loss is not linear. If you have a goal to lose 50 pounds, you can lose 50 pounds. Is it going to happen in one cutting phase? Probably not. It could, but for most people, no, it has to be done in these phases. Now, the fat loss phase typically can last 8 to 12 weeks. It could be a little longer, right? Kind of dependent on the person. Um, you can go, maybe 16, 20 weeks somewhere in there, but typically just for the average person trying to, drop some body fat, 8 to 12 weeks is a really good place to kind of settle into before that break is actually needed. Longer than that, and your results are going to diminish. pretty simplistic because the body just recognizes what we're doing and it adapts hard. That's why contest prep tends to be harder on people because they have to diet longer than 8 to 12 weeks, and the body starts to adapt and to get some people moving toward the end goal. They have to kind of dig deep, and that's when that fatigue gets high and things of that nature. So now this is a part of it too. If you're not seeing the changes that you want by week 3 or week 4, it's time for an honest audit. If we have the proper deficit in place, if we're getting the steps, if we're getting the sleep, and we're getting the recovery, we're doing everything right, right? Let's have an honest audit. I'm not saying that you're lying, but you may be over tracking. You may be doing things that you aren't fully aware of. So it's time for an honest audit, just to be sure, right? Because you don't want to waste several weeks after that saying, well, maybe it'll start to go in the right direction, right? Let's just have an honest audit, make sure that you're doing exactly what you need to do, and then just go from there. Um, During that audit, you'll either find that either your tracking is off, your movement is not as consistent as you think it is, or you're not actually in a deficit. Like for instance, my coach, his check-in form for me is pretty. It's kind of overkill to some degree for what it is. I wouldn't want to have you guys fill this out every week. It takes me probably 30, 45 minutes just to fill mine out. But it's asking me the daily step count every single day, down to the step, right? So it really makes me audit every single week of, man, I was, 200 steps short this week, or I was this, or I was that. But I'm very hyper aware of what I'm doing each and every day for that matter. Now, moving into the maintenance phase, this is where you stabilize and recover from the fat loss phase. Now, this is probably the most important phase in the system. Whereas the priming phase, I would say, probably comes second or a first tie with this one. Um, the biggest deal here is that fat loss does not stop when the scale stops moving. It stops when your body has stabilized and has hit its new set point. Now, all of this is considering that adherence is on point, right? If our adherence isn't on point, then we're just playing a guessing game at that point. Now, all of this takes time, and this is what the maintenance phase is for. This phase is where we gradually increase calories back up to maintenance for a short amount of time. We maintain training and movement. We let the biofeedback kind of bounce back. Anything from hormones, energy, if you're a female, your menstrual cycle, digestion issues. We're trying to get the body back to a good baseline set point to where it's not stressed out, digestion is not overworked, and the body is just comfortable at where it's at. We want to rebuild consistency with our plan, everything from steps, food, workouts, everything, without having excess fatigue, crazy hunger. You just feel good during this phase, right? Everything just seems easy. It's like coasting, right? It just gives your body time to lock into this new body fat set point. This is kind of like if you marinate chicken breast, right? You cut it up, you put it in the bag, and you let it marinate for several days at a time. You just let that chicken soak, just let it get used to that marinade. So when it's time to cook it, it's out of the bag. It's ready to go, right? It's been maintaining that taste, that flavor, and until it's ready to, I guess, go into the next phase on the grill or whatever. But the biggest mistake during this maintenance phase, shifting from a cut to the maintenance, is people like to jump right back into their old habits, or they try to stay in that deficit forever. And that's how you ruin your metabolism and you regain the weight. If you lost 30 pounds and you ended up having to do 15,000 steps a day, 4 days of cardio a week, and 1,500 calories, but you like the look that you have now, well, cool deal. You can maintain that, but you cannot maintain that output forever. You have to slowly work your way back up to maintenance, drop those steps down, drop the cardio down, up the food, and you have to get back to a good homeostatic baseline because you will not be able to stay there forever. Now, maintenance can typically last 4 to 8-ish weeks, depending on how long that you've dieted. Um, if you've spent 12 weeks of like hard cutting, like you've been moving pretty quickly, you should plan to spend at least a few weeks at maintenance before even thinking about hopping into another deficit. I mean, there's been some people to where we've been cutting for several weeks. We ran one 7 day refeed. They come back the next week, and all about feedback was good. We ran another 7 day refeed. Come back again the next week. Weight was down again. We ran another 7 day refeed. Kind of back at that maintenance set point. And then once we hopped back into the deficit, the weight just kept coming off. So, plan to spend a few weeks at maintenance. Um, at certain times during the cut. It's not, people like to think of maintenance or the holding phase as like, oh, I'm just wasting time. I'm just sitting here idling. And that's not the case at all. It's just one of the things that just has to be done. It's just like if you're painting a room, right? You put that first coat of paint on and you have to wait until it cures and it dries. If you get too impatient and you go try to put that second coat on the wall before the first coat is done, you're more likely to mess up the first coat and you have to start all over again. So it's very important to just give that maintenance period time to settle in and your body to adapt to its new baseline. Now, number four, once you get out of the maintenance, what do you do? Do you repeat it or do you shift gears based on what your goal is? So after that maintenance phase, there are two good options. You hop back into another fat loss phase, and this is more so for clients who have more body fat to lose. We can re-enter that cut typically 3 to 6-ish weeks. All these numbers are just arbitrary. This is not anything set in stone. It's all based off of biofeedback, but 3 to 6-ish weeks of solid maintenance. Of eating them at maintenance, a good recovery, good sleep, low stress, things of that nature, good strength performance. I mean, you can hop back into the fat loss phase, or you can shift into a building muscle, building strength phase. Now, this is something that I would recommend for clients who got pretty lean, and they got pretty shredded during their cut, and now they want to pack on a little bit of muscle. It's time to jump into a very small surplus and build some tissue. Either way, you're not going to stay in fat loss mode forever. This is where people go wrong. They think dieting is a lifestyle, and it's not. It's a temporary tool to get you to a healthier place. Then you'll be able to shift gears, and kind of determine which direction that you want to go at that point. So, what can you look for to know what phase that you are in right now? If you're a client of mine, you can look on your timeline phase, and see what phase that you're in for the most part. But if not, you can assess where you currently are at. If your biofeedback is poor, your tracking is not very good, you're not really following anything to the T, your stress is high, recovery is poor, you may need a restart. Begin priming, begin that baseline set point phase once again. If your habits are dialed in, your sleep is good, energy's good, everything is kosher, you're ready to cut. If you've been losing in a cut for 8 to 12 weeks and progress was great at first, but it has slowed down some, you may need a short period at maintenance and then, hop right back into the deficit if that's what you wish for, or if you're done with the cut, hop into a muscle building phase. This is how we protect the metabolism while getting results. This is not something to where we grind the food down as low as we can go, crank the cardio and the steps up as high as we can go, and just run you into the ground, get that quote unquote scale number that we want, and then we're not happy because we look flat, stringy. We feel like garbage, but the number is down where we need it to be, right? That's not what we're after. You have to keep in mind that you have to stop trying to cut your way through every plateau and just going from point A to point B in a straight line, because fat loss is never linear. It's not linear. So if you start using these phases to move your body forward, you'll treat fat loss more like a planned schedule, and as always, these timelines are going to be tentative. Nothing is going to be, set in stone kind of thing, but it's more of a set in stone phase that we can look forward to instead of just going until we can't go anymore. So that's when you really get in trouble with things. So um, that's all that I have for you guys today as far as that goes. I know that's not anything foreign. I know that a lot of you are aware that fat loss is not linear, but sometimes it's good to hear what phases that you can go through to get you to a quicker end result, I guess is the best way to put that, instead of just grinding things through until you break, essentially. So, anybody got any questions with anything?
Hey, Austin, can you hear me?
Yes.
So if you were to go into a muscle building phase, obviously you're going to gain just a little bit of fat with that.
hmm
Um, After that phase is over with, would you say go back to maintenance for a little bit, or would you jump straight into a deficit from that point?
So it's going to depend on how much body fat that you put on. So if it was me and it wasn't a ton of body fat, which I think in the bulking phase anyway, you should be very careful of how much body fat that you put on anyway. I like to look at the person's mm, m most fattiest part of them, I guess is the nicest way to put that. So like for me, that's my glutes and my hamstrings. So once I get to a certain set point in the bulk to where that fat gain on my hamstrings and on my glutes is more than I think that it should be, or my waist measurements are more than they should be, that's when I'll stop the bulk. And more than likely, um, I'm probably not going to shift into a maintenance phase at that point. I'll hop straight into a mini cut, um, a 4 to 6, 4 to 8 week a mini cut. Pull as much body fat off as I can, and then hop right back into the bulk. Now, if you bulk for a long time and then you're wanting to transition into like a prep phase to where this is a longer duration cut. Um, I like to call it the pre-prep phase, or it's essentially the maintenance phase. We're getting biofeedback at a baseline, or we're pulling cardio back. We're getting everything at a very minimal set point to where we can start to then dial things up. So I think it really depends on where you're at. I would say if you have low body fat accrual during the bulking phase, and like appetite's bad, digestion is bad, sleep is poor, hop into a mini cut, pull a little bit off, pull some of that water off, that inflammation off, regain that appetite to regain that insulin sensitivity, and then go back up. But if it's a more longer duration cut, hop into that pre-prep phase or a maintenance phase, and then do that longer duration cut, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. All right, I seen the other Jacob went unmuted earlier. You got anything, Mr. Sapega?
Well, you know I will. Um, so I was just in terms of like with clients that you're dealing with, are you able to get a pretty good gauge, I guess through the mini cuts that you do with us on how long, like say a prep phase would be? Because I would assume that would just be like a longer phase, and the mini cuts probably give you a good idea.
Yeah, so the easiest way that I like to set that up is I like to use that percent rate of loss as a good like guess metric, I guess is the best way to put that. So if you're, 200 100 pounds and and the show is in, I don't know, 20 weeks or whatever, we have just because every single one of those weeks will not be a fat loss week, right? So let's just say that you have 15 weeks of active fat loss in a 20-week cut, right? And if I'm going to go on the average of like at least a 1% rate of loss, I can kind of calculate, all right, if he's 200 pounds, I want at least a 1%, rate of loss each and every week. That's 2 pounds a week, right? And we're going to have 15 weeks of active fat loss. That equates to 30 pounds lost, right? So it's it kind of takes out it kind of gives me a guess point of how long that it could take. But again, if I haven't dieted you down before, it is going to be a guess on like, kind of where you'll land and how long it'll take us to get there. But if we know that, hey, if we have this certain threshold of I need you to lose 1% on the rate of loss scale each and every week, and as long as we can uphold that and that average is upheld, let's say if it's zero point 0.8 a 1 week, a 1.2 the next week, an average of one, right? We can kind of map out like, hey, as long as he keeps this average up in that 15-week span of fat loss, he's going to lose 30 pounds, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that's maybe getting more technical than maybe you wanted me to get, but it's more or less of we can get a general idea of how long it's gonna take to get you to where that you need to be. But at the end of the day, it's a guesstimation,
Yeah.
um, is what it is. So, but yeah, good question. Thank you. Anybody else have anything? And I will say, I think for you, Jacob, when we did yours, um, I'm pretty sure there was, off the top of my head, I think we made changes, several changes in that little 10 to 12 week span. It was almost like 8 or 9 changes in that little 10 to 12 weekish span. I think we were making changes fairly often, I believe, if I remember correctly, just because in that mini cut phase, we're trying to push that threshold as high as we could push it because we know that the mini cut has a shorter duration of time as well too. So
Yeah. Yeah. I pulled up the sheet actually while you were talking, just to kind of look over it. And yeah, there were definitely some about most of the weeks there were definitely some changes made.
yeah, yeah.
So
And that's where, and this is kind of going off topic a touch, but this is where you can differentiate from what to do in a mini cut and what to do in a longer fat loss phase. Like if you were losing that 0.5 to 1 0% rate of loss, but each and every week, I mean, you're good, right? Like there is no need to really change anything. But in a mini cut, and we have a shortened window, if we can push that 1.0 up to 1.5, let's just do it because we have a very small window
yeah.
to make that fat loss happen. So, you know, if we made 8 changes, we probably could have made 2 changes, 3 changes in a typical cut, and still had good progression, but not as fast as what you had it, I guess is the best way to put that. So, but anyway, hope this made a lot of sense. If you guys got any questions with anything, just let me know. As always, shoot me a message and we'll go from there. But I appreciate you guys showing up and I'll talk to you guys soon. See y'all.